I think communicating is really key, and I think it's just speaking to new teachers about their experience. And as you said, I think sometimes we are isolated, and as a new teacher that's really frightening because you don't always know what to do or where to go if you're stuck with an issue or a question. So I think just checking in, and the school I'm in now, the head, makes that her paramount goal, that she'll walk into your class and say, "Oh, how was your day? How are you doing?" And that's such a brilliant question. And often, you might say, "Oh, it's a really tough day," and then you then begin that narrative about why was it tough? Was it a lesson, or is it something to do with transitions? And again, suddenly you're having that discussion about teaching and learning, and then you leave feeling empowered to do whatever you're going to do differently the next day. So I think communication is just really critical.
So I'm here today with Hannah Spence and Cami Dodd, two remarkably inspiring teachers who've graduated from the Teach First program. We talk a lot in the interview around growth mindset and how to create a culture of creativity and passion within the classroom. Passion just exudes from both of these fascinating teachers who are really, really committed to inspiring the next generation through educational leadership. In fact, they're actually on their masters to do educational leadership, and we talk a lot about that in the interview too. You'll see from the interview that we get straight into it, and this is one of the most fun and engaging interviews that I've done to date. So lock right in and let's have some fun talking about teaching. Really fascinated and inspired to have you both here today. You both said that you've never been doing an interview before. No. So it kind of resonates with the show, right? Because one of the things that I wanted to bring to the show was that that there's a complete misalignment between what people think education is, what people think teaching is, what people think teachers go through, and then there's like a media summation of everything that teachers go through, and like it's the media that often tells the story about what education is and what teachers go through, and actually the media aren't the people that are in it. So I wanted to bring the experts on and share your journey. So Hannah, tell us a little bit about who you are first and what you do.
Okay, so I'm Hannah. I've been in teaching now for 4 years. I'm currently working in a primary school, an independent primary school in London, teaching primary, which is all subjects except for music, French and art, which are taught by our specialist teachers. And I'm also English lead as well, so accountable for all things literacy based.
Fantastic. Do your school have JNC education doing your art and French?
No, they don't yet. Not yet.
I like it. And Cami, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a year 2 teacher in a state primary school in South London. I'm also PSHE coordinator and healthy schools lead for the school currently. So I teach everything. Everything.
And just to give some context, right? So I met Hannah on New Year's Eve.
Yes.
The So Solid party, right? In Croydon Box Park, right? We were there and we met through mutual friends, Byron and Bianca, and we just had an awesome time, an awesome vibe. So I'm one of them people, I just love being around positive energy. And when I talked to, we were talking to Joseph Hammond, music teacher at JNC earlier, and he was just talking about like how he's so passionate about what he does, and that kind of, he spoke about it as being something that's quite natural. I want to get your thoughts and insights. Do you think like a passion for teaching and enthusiasm is quite natural? Or do you think that can be taught?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah. Well, okay. I think when I went into teaching, I didn't fully understand what teaching was going to be, and I had a real passion for working with children and being around children. I also had a passion for art because I studied art at university, so I was quite creative, and I thought I'd be able to translate that into teaching. And then I think as I developed as a teacher, I actually found more skills that were within me that I didn't know I had. And actually, I think personally through my journey in teaching, I've found different routes that I feel good at and also kind of really passionate about.
Yeah. What would you say were your strengths as a teacher?
That's a strangely hard question to answer.
Really?
Oh, I don't know. I'd have to think about that.
Okay. And by the way, just for context, like Cami and I have just met today.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw you on the spot a little bit, Cami,
okay.
but don't worry, it's going to come to you. So what do you think your strengths are as a teacher, Hannah?
I think, as you raised, I think positivity is definitely something you have to have, and both Cami and I took the route into teaching via a charity which is very much vision aligned and wanted to address the disparity in educational disadvantage and address that issue. So I think immediately you go into teaching with that passion, with that positivity that you can make an impact, and I think that is something that has been able to help me overcome challenges that I found while being in the teaching sector. Definitely being positive, I think, is a strength. Equally, having a great sense of humour.
Yeah, I love that.
It's definitely up there with being one of the survival tools as a teacher.
I remember when I used to teach PE, right? I used to literally just like, even if I was teaching like year 1, year 3 or year 6, I used to literally just make jokes to myself. And like teaching assistants or other adults would walk past and they would just be like, oh, you're so funny kind of thing. Like, but some of the kids would get it and then some of them wouldn't, and I was like, don't worry, you'll get it later.
But definitely, it gets you through those tough times as well.
Yeah, for sure. So how did you two meet?
So we met through Teach First. So our route into teaching was we trained with Teach First, which is a charity. So we met in our initial training, and then we were also placed in the same federation of schools. So we worked together as well.
Yeah.
And now we're doing our masters, finishing off our masters together as well. So
Fantastic.
yeah.
What was that Teach First experience like? Because that's something that's relatively new. Like, when did it come in? Maybe 8-9 years ago, or something like that, or?
Yeah, I think it was a bit longer than that.
In the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Don't quote us. Okay. But I think maybe even 2000 might have been the first. Or 2005. Within, I think it started just with a few amount of people, and then it started to really expand in 2005 and onwards. And I think now it's it takes in a massive amount of graduates as teachers. Yeah.
It's definitely grown, because it started to come to my attention maybe around 2012-ish. Yeah, it's definitely grown, and now it's like a nationwide thing. Definitely. What was that experience like for you guys?
Well, I mean, it's as you said, it's a fantastic charity with a great vision. Part of the vision is that they place us in challenging contexts. So that's something, as you know, new to the profession, we're not really sure what challenging means. Right. We're very aware of what challenging means now, and often those challenges could be with you're working within very poor communities and trying to address those challenges, or it could be behavioural challenges, or management within the school could be challenging. So any of those, and I think sometimes all of those things come into play within the context that you're working in. But again, as you know, Jazz, it's just great to work within a community, and Teach First is definitely a community, and you can draw on the strength and advice of others within that context. And I think that was what was really liberating about it. Although, you know, you're in a difficult situation, you can often find advice and expertise from other people to help get you through that. What about you?
I think a very similar thing. I think it was really challenging, and a really challenging route into teaching. Specifically as well, I think because of the but because of the nature of the course, our training in actual being a teacher, and the subject knowledge and the assessment and the pedagogy and everything like that was very limited. So we had to learn all of that on the job. Right. And I think when you're in a challenging environment, that can be compromised quite a lot. And I think the thing with Teach First is that it's such a strong community that even if you feel as though you're failing at everything every single day, you sort of still find the strength to kind of carry on and get to where we are today.
I absolutely love that collegiality. Even the sense of you guys being here today together is quite powerful, because one of the things that has been challenging for teachers historically is isolation. And it's this like constant isolation. Yes, there's other adults in the building, but actually how often do they connect? Oh, hi in the corridor, like at lunchtime and break time, which is not really a deep and meaningful connection. So one of the things that's really powerful about what's happened at Teach First is the collegiality and the community between teachers. I'm not very knowledgeable on Teach First itself, so how does it work? Like, what period of time do you have to spend teaching? What period of time do you have to spend in the classroom, theory, and so on? How does it work?
Okay, so you kind of hit, as Cami said, you hit the ground running. So you have 6 weeks initial training prior to going to the classroom, and that will equip you with the basic knowledge, the
So is that training in a sort of centre with other teachers?
Yeah, so in a centre, we went to Leeds University, and we all met there, and then we had behaviour management courses and safeguarding courses, so you're equipped with the bare minimum to be able to enter the classroom. That's 6 weeks, and then you enter the classroom full-time teacher. Off you go. And then we did our studying for the PGCE at the same time, so simultaneously. So you learn a theory, then you go back to the classroom and apply that theory on the go. So
what's the ratio between being in the classroom and learning the theory?
I think it was, I think we had time out, I think it was 1 day a week, I think, out of class. From what I can remember, I don't know if you could probably remember something different.
No, I think the schools give us a little bit of extra time out of class to complete essays or to do reading, but you know, you're a full-time teacher, and that's the expectation of you.
Got it. And then what would you say, Cami, is your philosophy on teaching and education?
So I think for me personally, I'm very passionate about children having the opportunity to develop lots of different parts of themselves as people, as well as academically. So I'm PSHE lead now, and I'm really passionate about mental health specifically. So for me, that's really, really important that I educate children in how to kind of translate the world around them and to deal with them, whatever, if they're having challenges at home or anything like that, and become kind of confident, independent young learners, as well as kind of academically. It's one of the main reasons why I started my company is because there was often like a dissonance between you're either academic or you're artistic, or you're either you know, systematic and data analyst, or you're creative, and it's always just like there's always been this narrative of you're either one or the other, and actually you can be both, and it's about tapping into children's intuition to be able to access both of those elements of the brain and really become powerful like they're supposed to be, right, and like they can be. What about you, Hannah?
Again, I think, funny enough, it's quite similar to Cami. I think the view of a child as a whole child is something that's definitely paramount in education today, and something that I firmly believe in. So whilst academic is really important, you know, the well-being of children and their confidence and mindset about education themselves, to me, that those are the skills that we need to help develop in children in order for them to be successful as adults. Also with that is my firm belief that a passion for reading also is a key skill for children to be able to tackle the world and to have a wealth of opportunities available to them.
Love it. And what are the challenges, would you say, that you've been through, Hannah, in that experience, that transition from sort of graduating at Teach First to actually where you are now as a teacher? What would you say was one of the biggest challenges that you've been through?
I'd say for me, I think I had a real sense of moral purpose working in a school that I worked in previously, which is a state school. Shifting to an independent sector was quite a conflicted move for me.
Okay, what are the differences there?
The differences are, funnily enough, I think the differences are quite few. For me, one of the biggest differences was the pay, but then the expectations then placed on you as a teacher, I find, are greater, and that might be just specific to my school. The accountability stakes seem to be higher, also from that perspective, and there's a lot more parent involvement and expectation of you there. But again, they're children, and children are all the same, and for me, every child needs to have the same level of opportunity and the same high quality teacher in the classroom in order for them to be successful. Again, I work in a girls' school, and as you know, there's massive gender disparity in the workforce. So for me to then equip the girls with knowledge and to be able to challenge those gender stereotypes is really critical for me, and that's how I kind of balance that sense of moral purpose.
What's the challenge that you've been through in terms of getting the girls on side, in terms of challenging those stereotypes?
That's really interesting. I think partially the context where it's all girls, they then challenge those stereotypes just automatically. There's no other gender there that can undermine what they do.
Wow, that's
equally, there's lots of things in the media that impress itself on the girls and their views of what they can and can't do.
Yes.
So whilst one girl will be like, you shouldn't be doing sport, I'm like, but you're doing the sport, you're playing hockey, what do you mean you can't play if you're doing it? So I think then they still need that nurturing, and I think because it's a girls' school, they might think that they're able to tackle those stereotypes now, but again, it's giving them that confidence that they can do that even beyond an all-girls context.
Yeah.
So that is their fear in me, that whilst they're challenging these stereotypes every day between themselves, once they go out to the real world, will they be able to do that? Will they have the confidence to do that?
What are the typical stereotypes that you have to challenge on a regular basis?
I think really usually it's particularly in my class now, it's with maths.
Mm-hmm.
This belief that maths is really hard.
Wow.
Although they're excelling at maths, and I tell them this every day, and with the hard work that they can continue to do so. I think there is that view. Again, although it's all girls, you do have some girls who attain more highly in sport, for example, and then you have other girls saying, well, I can't do this, because they're looking to someone else who is doing it. And I think the challenge there is to shift in their mindset to say, well, what is that person doing well, and how can you imitate that so that you can do as well or better than they can? And I think, again, whilst those conversations in the class are really critical, I'm not always sure those conversations are happening at home. And I know myself as a parent, before I became a teacher, I wasn't having those conversations at home because I wasn't aware of how powerful those conversations are. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges.
I don't know if you ever watched that series with Anne Robinson, where she was going into schools and talking to young girls about the stereotypes. Did you watch it?
No, I haven't seen it. Have you seen it?
Really interesting show. Did you see it, Cammy?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, about a year or two ago. One of the things, I'm not quoting specifically, but it was like they went into this toy shop, right? And they said, look at all the toys for all the boys, and there's 95% about science, technology, engineering, building, all of these things, building, right, creativity. And he said, and then they took us to the women's section, and they're like, look at all these toys. The first thing you notice is that they're all pink. Like they're all pink, and they're all girly, and they're all like, and I mean girly in the sense of they're all like stereotypically girly in a sense of like what was it, like cutie sticks and things about beauty and things about makeup and things about looks and appearance. But a lot of the toys just lack substance, and the show was about highlighting that and how this sort of influences girls' behaviour. Cammy, how do you feel like teaching both boys and girls, I presume, how do you feel the differences in how they relate to you as a teacher come across?
How they relate to me? Well, I think the same kind of stereotypes or ideas of stereotypes exist in a mixed environment. So I think the girls still have that same barriers to get through, but I think boys do as well. I think maybe in other ways. So like some boys really struggle in playground situations, for example, and they really, because if they're not outgoing or they don't want to play a game that involves running around or fighting or something like that, then they maybe feel a bit isolated and they really struggle to kind of understand themselves. So I think the same sort of things exist really, and I think I've just found this Gender Action Award, which we've now established in our school, which is kind of starting to unpick these stereotypes and actually present like role models in particular for children to kind of understand that these men and women can be, all these different things that they maybe have never come across in their own life.
It's really, really powerful. Do you notice any, I don't know if your children are too young for you to notice this, but do you notice like differences in terms of types of questions that you might ask and the readiness of boys to answer one type of question and girls to answer another type, or anything like that?
That's interesting. I don't know. I don't think so. I think maybe they're too young because I teach in year 2. They're just developing self-awareness. So I don't think I wouldn't say that there's like less contribution from boys or girls around a particular subject. However, they are definitely starting to understand what they find difficult, and I think it is it does happen that in maths, for example, girls are less willing to risk take sometimes, and boys will maybe throw themselves into things with
even if they get it wrong, right?
Yeah, exactly, and seem to be maybe more resilient around making mistakes than girls, I would say, probably.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I definitely want to do like some sort of research and a study on that type of narrative. I think that's remarkably important in terms of just engaging boys and girls in a really cohesive way.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are the challenges that you face, Cami, in a school setting and since the start of your teaching journey?
I think in a personal challenges, I found confidence in myself as a teacher has kind of wavered quite a lot. So although I'm now in my 4th year of teaching, I think you have to really build up a resilience as a teacher to kind of feel like you're failing and making mistakes a lot of the time. And on a personal level, I found that challenging. I think there have been occasions when I probably should have had more support that I wasn't able to have because of challenges in the environment or with my provider or training, and have maybe had to cope with quite a lot of stuff as a professional. But I think as you kind of develop as a teacher, you realise that you are responsible for, you have a huge responsibility for the children, not only the children but yourself as well as a professional. And I think, you know, the further in you get to teaching, the more experience you have, the more you realise how much you have to sort of look after yourself.
What would you say that schools could do better, generally speaking, in order to support new teachers into the industry?
I think communicating is really key, and I think it's just speaking to new teachers about their experience. And as you said, I think sometimes we are isolated, and as a new teacher that's really frightening because you don't always know what to do or where to go if you're stuck with an issue or a question. So I think just checking in, and the school I'm in now, the head, you know, makes that her paramount goal that she'll walk into your class and say, "Oh, how was your day? How are you doing?" And that's such a brilliant question. And often, you know, you might say, "Oh, it's a really tough day," and then you then begin that narrative about why was it tough? Was it a lesson, or is it something to do with transitions? And again, suddenly you're having that discussion about teaching and learning. And then you leave feeling, you know, empowered to do whatever you're going to do differently the next day. So I think communication is just really critical.
So you guys are both studying your masters at the moment. Tell us about that. What is the masters in, and what's the process?
So it's a masters in educational leadership. So we started it when we were doing our PGCE. And we've sort of taken a bit of a break, and we've now come back to it. So we are both actually kind of coincidentally both exploring creativity in education, and with a kind of specific focus. Well, I'm doing a specific focus on how middle leaders and subject leaders can foster creativity in their subject. So
tell us about that. How do you do that?
That's the magic answer. I'm not sure. I think well, what I'm going to be exploring is how to kind of with all the like government expectations and senior leaders' expectations, how to really inspire children and other teachers to teach your subject in a creative way.
I love that. I've actually just written a book called Passion for Learning, How to Engage Your Learners and Unlock Their Potential, which is one of the things that we were talking about when we were queuing up to go into the social invite. Like, how geeky is that? We're going into a party, we're queuing up and we're talking about books.
People were overtaking us in the queue as well.
But hey, we love it, right? Passion for learning.
Definitely.
We love this stuff, and you know, one of the ways that I love to learn is through reading, for sure. But yeah, how to engage learners and unlock their potential. What are you picking up from your masters, Hannah, in terms of that creative side and how to bring the best out of children?
I think for me it was really useful to do kind of a narrative inquiry into my own understanding of what creativity is. So I did like a case study on one pupil who wanted to write a poem with rhyme, and I said no, we're not doing rhyme. And immediately I started to think, oh well, am I stifling her creativity? Maybe doing rhyme is what's going to make her creative. And I think it's really interesting then what my language is around them being creative. And then as Cami and I have discovered, as we kind of try and unpick what creativity is, that there's so many faces to it. So, you know, creativity, my understanding was, you know, just freedom, but actually other people have a different understanding of what creativity is. And that can be, you know, problem solving or risk taking or just a number of different things. And I think just to understand what creativity is the first step to then fostering it within the classroom.
And how would you define it?
I would say creativity is solving a problem that you want answered. And I think that's what it is to me. And hopefully to the girls that I teach. But again, I think having a discussion with the children as well as to what creativity is would be a good step.
Very, very important. And you mentioned that the masters is around leadership as well. Is that something that you ladies are both aspiring to do, is to become inspiring leaders, head teachers, or is there a different narrative, a different route that you guys are going? I see loads of nods here. Good,
sounds good.
Love it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for me to be a head teacher would be great, because obviously the higher up you go, the broader the impact that you have on children. At the same time, I
can't wait to see you be a head teacher. This is going to be amazing, by the way.
I don't know. The children might say different.
Part of the reason why I say that is because I've never. It's weird because I've been in education for 15 years, right? And I've never met somebody as a teacher who's then transcended into headship, except for one. There's a guy called Rashid, I think his surname is Ben Sergan, and he was an administrator at a school that we used to work at about 13 years ago. And then I walked into a school that we worked with the other day in Harrow, and he was there and he's like, "Hi, I'm Rashid the head, do you remember me?" And I was like, "Oh my word, like that's incredible." But I'm really looking forward to seeing when you become a head teacher.
Excellent.
I know that you're going to be a very, very inspiring leader. I can just tell it from your energy.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you're going to be a head teacher. What about yourself, Cami?
Yeah, I mean, I came into education wanting to change things, and I think as I progressed through my career, there are problems I want to tackle more and more. So whether I become a head teacher, I'm not sure, but I think definitely a role where I can have a big impact and change the things I'm really passionate about. So whether that's a Senko or a leader in a school or something,
or policy,
something different, maybe policy, maybe even charity, I'm not sure, but
Fantastic. What about executive headship? Is that something that you guys have thought about, and is that something that you're aspiring towards, and like what are your thoughts as well on MATs, because that's something relatively new that's coming as well?
I mean, within the context I'm in now, executive headship isn't really a concept at the moment. I know in our previous school it was, and again you have more accountability over a greater number of pupils. Again, multi-academy trust, I work within a trust at the moment, but still each school is quite individual as to how it's managed, but again really open to any, to new possibilities, to different contexts. And as Cami and I said, just having that wider impact is really aspirational.
There's a big misconception, especially from parents, and I'm a parent, because I work in education, I kind of know it, right? The big misconception between what parents believe teachers do on a day-to-day basis and what a typical teacher's day looks like. So tell us from your perspective, Cami, what's a day in the life like for you?
Day in the life. So I get into school, I arrive at school at 7:30 in the morning. I spend probably about an hour preparing for my lessons that day. So that involves printing, finishing off resources, especially in year 2, it involves quite a lot of practical things like getting out resources to use, things like that. I then spend probably about half an hour briefing my teaching assistant when she comes in. We have a conversation, I tell her what she needs to do for the day, if we have time, I kind of tell her about the lessons we're doing, and then the children come in. Pretty much from the time the children come in to the time the children leave, if I'm being honest, I don't stop working at all.
Yeah.
So I am in a school where the workload is quite high, the expectations of teachers are quite high.
What is the workload? Talk to us about that.
So there are three main elements of workload in my current school and in most schools. So there's planning for teaching lessons, there's marking, and then there's assessment, which you could argue marking and assessment are the same thing, but I think in lots of schools they're three separate things. And myself, I'm a middle leader, so I have extra responsibilities as well.
Sure.
So that might involve talking to other teachers, talking to external providers, organising events, things like that as well.
That's really interesting, just in terms of what you said around planning, marking and assessment being, like, what percentage of your time would you say that takes up? Would you say that's quite heavy in terms of outside of the 9 to 3:30 environment?
Yeah, so the majority of my time spent after school is marking.
Yeah.
So in my current school, we are required to mark every single piece of work that we teach. So that's about 90 books a day. So that's a lot of admin.
Ouch, that feels uncomfortable to me. That just be like, I'm like,
physical
ouch,
pain.
Like I was a PE teacher, I got away light with that, right? Like,
I don't mark 90 books a day. I try and fit it in where I can. But then I will often go home and I'll end up planning for maybe an hour in the evenings as well, just bits and bobs that need to be done for the next day. And my weekends I probably spend about, realistically, on top of my PPA time, probably about 3 or 4 hours of the weekend working as well.
Wow, is that marking, planning or assessment?
That's planning usually.
That sounds very, very heavy.
It is heavy. It is.
I've actually been speaking to a few head teachers, like one called Matthew Bradley and one called Jeremy Hannay, and a lot of their thinking processes is quite innovative and quite outside of the normal realm of education. Like Jeremy talks about a very limited marking policy, and like I've had other head teachers talk about this kind of like active marking framework, where it's not doing stuff for a particular criteria, but it's actually active marking on the spot. Active feedback is what they call it. Yeah. Do you think that that's something that resonates, or do you think that's something that's possible in more schools? Or
yeah, I definitely think so. I think there are lots of school systems that have quite maybe an old-fashioned, I don't want to say what old-fashioned, traditional way of marking and assessing work, which is to make sure each piece of work is marked and then to feed back in the next day. And there's so much evidence to support feedback straight away is much more effective in children's learning. So I think if presented in the right way, schools could switch quite easily to this, and I think the learning wouldn't be affected, if not improved, immediately. I think it's just a case of change, really.
We're quite fortunate because it's like one of the things with the creative subjects like art, modern foreign languages, PE, drama, etc. Active feedback is like the norm. It's very much the norm. It very much has to be done, like, because it's like fibre memorization in terms of PE and everything like that. If you give active feedback, then you can improve it on the spot. But if you delay that feedback, then actually the active fibres sort of disengage, and you don't get that same outcome. So yeah, that's something that's really, really insightful. What are your thoughts on it, Hannah, in terms of active feedback?
Yeah, same. I think feedback is something that has to be done there and then. I mean, there are some schools, I think, that have been really brave and just have overturned their marking policies and have no marking. No marking in the sense that a teacher's not spending hours after school writing comments in the child's book that the child isn't likely to read. So again, just in that moment, giving that feedback. And I think there are, like Cami said, there's a conflict between traditional ways of teaching and like the more current ways where, sometimes a teacher might sit down with a group of children and then so the rest of the children aren't receiving that active feedback then, which is then why the marking's being done in books. But I think just a teacher moving around the class as they would a PE teacher or a music teacher listening. A teacher needs to be moving around and giving active feedback to each pupil for that learning to be most effective.
Yeah,
definitely.
Got it. So if you were to become a head teacher tomorrow then, Hannah, what would you do in terms of planning, marking and assessment? What would your philosophy be and how would that look?
Okay, so I think the first thing I do is verbal feedback is the most useful piece of feedback. So I'd be expecting and encouraging all my teachers to be given that feedback in the moment, and then hopefully then that would free up the workload for them. So I think a heavy teacher workload is so disruptive to teachers, and so many leave, and it's such a shame to see fantastic teachers leaving the profession because of that. And that's workload is something I struggle with, being a parent as well. Trying to balance that is very difficult.
Everybody expects you to be all things at all times to everybody, right? Which is
So having those discussions around teacher well-being is another thing that I would definitely transform if I were head teacher.
What are your thoughts, Cami, on well-being? Like, what can schools do to positively impact the well-being of staff and children alike?
I think a similar thing. I think prioritising and actually having a conversation with your staff about well-being is really important, because I think it's not a buzzword, but I think maybe it's become a little bit of an escape route for some teachers or some leaders to maybe not really address properly. I think maybe they have I know some schools have like a wellbeing officer, which I think is a really good idea, someone whose job it is to actually prioritise these things. But actually the conversation really, I don't think is happening in a lot of schools. So, I mean, I think that would be really important.
It's certainly happening in the media.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think that's maybe hopefully translating into schools somehow. But
got it. I spoke with a teacher called Charlene over at Three Bridges Primary School just last week, and she was saying that one of the things that they did was they have a weekly activity for the teachers in the school. I know that's something that I actually did about 12 to 15 years ago. I used to go to schools and do like active participation, like yoga and different classes after school. But we sort of slowed down on that because we didn't get the take up. But Charlene said that in her schools that they literally all do it. There's literally like 80% of the teachers there every week doing yoga for 6 weeks, or doing dance, or doing Zumba for a period of time. And I just think it's so brilliant, not only in terms of the active participation, but in terms of the connection between teachers and the collegiality that it brings. And she said, like, no one leaves, like hardly anyone leaves this school because everyone is just so connected.
Yeah. That sounds really good.
You need to get her details.
I can put you in touch for sure.
Definitely.
So, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts around growth mindset, and how do you go about facilitating that in your classroom? Let's start with you on that one, Hannah.
Facilitating. So I think actually, Jazz, you were one of the first people to pick me up on the language around growth mindset. So that practical.
This outside the party again.
This is outside the party. So you were showing me something on your phone, like an app, and I was like, oh, I'm not good at tech. I don't know how to do that. And you said, not good at tech yet. And I think that's something. Immediately, I went back to the classroom and made sure that whenever a child said, I'm not good at this, I just added yet instead of saying, oh, you are good at it. Look what you can do. It's just immediately yet, so that whilst they're lacking in confidence at the moment, they know that they can improve, rather than trying to challenge their idea that they're not good at it or not. Just adding that yet, I think, is really crucial. So using the language in the classroom, and with members of staff as well that I lead, I think, they say, oh, I'm not confident with shared reading yet. And I think that's a really useful piece of feedback. So thank you for that.
No, language around the classroom is just, like, language around the school building is so important, and I feel like so many people, we overlook it, and the whole concept of growth mindset has come really heavily into schools over the last few years, and actually a lot of teachers miss it, a lot of schools miss it, because the language that we use to the kids is not actually impacting your growth mindset. And one of the things that I talk about quite a lot is like how you use positive language to reframe process. So simple things like, you see a child running down the corridor, right? And a lot of the times our instant reaction is, stop running! Right? But it's like, if you can flip that and focus on the positive thing that you want the child to do, then actually it's embedding a different process and different thinking process in the mind. So it's like, walk please, as opposed to stop running, because this is the active thing that I want you to do now. yeah, and I find it really inspiring how that impacts, like, and it's not just that statement, right? And there's nothing wrong with saying stop running, but it's just thinking about how we use language to dictate performance and how children behave.
Definitely agree.
What are your language cues that you use commonly, Cami, around growth mindset?
Yeah, I'd say a similar thing. I try really hard I have quite a lot of conversations with my class about the words like right and wrong, and we also talk a lot about making mistakes. So I make it very clear to them that in order to learn, you need to make mistakes, and actually mistakes are a positive thing to help you to learn. And I try to make mistakes in front of them as well, because I think that's really important for children to understand that you're not the beacon of all knowledge. You make mistakes, and actually learning is a process to kind of help them to understand what their brain is doing a little bit. But I think the growth mindset thing, using the kind of yet attitude is really helpful as well, so I'm going to try and do that a bit more as well, I think.
Love that. Incredible. So let's go into a quick fire round. I think you guys have shared some really, really insightful and engaging thoughts and experiences that are going to connect with so many people out there. So thank you so much for sharing that, and that's really, really courageous of you both. So I appreciate you both for that, for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to make a statement or say something, and just say the first thing that comes to your mind, and then I'm going to bounce between the both of you.
Okay.
Ready?
Nervous.
It's fine. Okay, so let's start with favourite holiday destination.
Sunny England.
Nice. Favourite book to read.
Anything written by Jacqueline Wilson.
Who?
Jacqueline Wilson.
Yes. Tell me a book that she's read, because I know the name, but I can't picture a book.
So her most current one is Wave Me Goodbye, which is a story set in World War II, where children had to leave their families to go to the country to be safe. She writes lots of children's books.
We're going to touch base on that. Favourite app on your phone, Cami?
WhatsApp.
Okay, cool. And same for you, Hannah. I see you nodding like vehemently. Most overused phrase in school?
I'm still waiting.
I love that one. I'm still waiting. I feel like you're singing a song. I'm still waiting. Yeah.
10 minutes in, I'm still waiting.
You should just have like a song on your phone. I'm still waiting. Yeah. What's your most overused phrase in school?
As you were saying that, I was thinking it's not a phrase, but I clap to, clap, and I just do that all the time. So I'd say probably I overclap.
Overclapping, that's a brand new. Is that even a word? Interesting. Favourite hobby, Cami?
Cooking and eating, I'd say.
Hannah?
Writing poetry. I love writing poems.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah.
Tell me the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the next word, right? Family.
Home.
Children.
Fun.
Culture.
People.
Teaching.
Writing.
Marking.
Subject lead.
Leadership.
Inspiring.
Books.
Adventures.
Children.
Passion.
Nice. I like that. Creativity.
Risk taking.
Nice. Sport.
Running.
Music.
Harmony.
Art.
Colour.
Science.
Experimenting.
Maths.
Problem solving.
School.
Love.
Love it. Cami, Hannah, it's been an absolute pleasure interviewing you both.
Fun.
I think that's been the most. I'm just going to say it. I think that's been the most exciting interview I've done so far.
Brilliant.
So thank you. And I've met really inspired. One of the head teachers that I met and that I interviewed last week almost made me cry.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah, it was deep and immersive. I was like, whoa. So yeah, I needed to laugh and I needed to enjoy. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.